Welcome back, everyone, to Aaron's Opinion. Jason Reynolds, welcome, of course. My first question, and really the main question I ask, is a question you've heard before, right? Who is Jason Reynolds?
Well, Aaron, first of all, thank you for having me.
You're always welcome here.
And the answer to that question is kind of a simple one. I'm 49 years old, and for most of my life, I was a long haul trucker until 3 years ago when I went blind. I've raised three kids and in the middle of raising a fourth. And other than that, I'm all about continuing to live with my blindness and not seeing it as a challenge. It hasn't slowed me down. I still do my day to day. I still try and keep life interesting, and I still have to function. And I'm trying to get the message out there that we're more than about just being blind. We still have to chop wood. We still have to cook. We still have to function day to day. So that's really who I am. Just a regular guy living with the added challenge of being blind.
I like that. I think that's a very accurate thing to say, and I think you're definitely on to something there. Um, Now let's go back in time and really unfold your life because you know that I love fascinating and entertaining stories. So, how originally, a long time ago, how originally did you get into long haul trucking? And what are some crazy things that you saw or happened to you, or some really entertain and enlighten me with some huge adventures that you had while on the road in those days?
Well, I got into trucking when I was in my late 20s. Before that, when I was younger, I did some time in the Canadian military and then tried doing some regular jobs, and it just wasn't for me. My grandfather was a trucker, and just one thing led to another, and I ended up driving truck. I started doing regional work around southern Manitoba and the prairies doing fertilizer and road oil and stuff. And that just wasn't enough. I ended up driving for a, a larger Canadian company doing the lower 48 and most of the Canadian provinces. Um, and I spent about 15 years at that company and drove a city bus for a while, then went back to trucking because trucking is better than driving a city bus. Um, as for that, I've driven all sorts of weather, and I've driven everything from the Florida Everglades all the way to the ice roads like you see on TV. So it's not that I was ever on TV, but I've driven across the ice roads and everything in between. Specific stories. I know a friend of mine was driving because I ran team quite a bit. We were driving across northern Ontario through moose country, and it was my sleep shift, and I was coming through the curtain to let him know it was time to pull over for a ablution break or rest break. And just as I was about to come through the curtain, a moose stepped out on the road, and of course he slammed on the brakes, and I ended up sitting my 380-pound frame on the dash. And we didn't end up damaging the truck. You just look at the truck, and we was able just to kind of clean the dust off the passenger side fender. But that made for an interesting stop and a great way to wake up. Only a couple hours from home, so um, a lot of it's weather related too. Another time I had a new driver driving because I did a lot of in cab training, and I was in Idaho. And as the wind kind of blows across the open terrain in Idaho, and the black ice kind of forming, it was a nice winter day, and we it was coming time to end the day anyway, and dinner time was coming up. So I said to the new driver, "Okay, there's a truck stop about 5 miles up," and I decided it was time to put my shoes on, and because I really enjoyed sock feet in the truck. My truck was always really clean, and So I'm there, I'm just doing up my shoelaces, and you just feel the wind pick the truck and just slide it across the highway. It's kind of a butt puckering experience. But after about 20 years of that, including 4 or 5 years driving a city bus, you get to see a lot of interesting and fun adventures, but you get to see a lot of the countryside. You really appreciate what there is out there in North America. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. What was the funniest thing that ever happened to you while you were trucking in all your years doing it?
funniest thing. Well, it's kind of funny and it's kind of not because it happened during one of the most tragic times in recent American history. It happened to be 9/11, the day the towers fell. And I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but I was teamed up with a driver whom I wasn't regular teamed up with because my truck was in the shop, and the company I drove for pulled computers out of Dell in Austin, Texas. So sometimes we did rush loads. We ran down there empty to pick up a load going either to Calgary, Alberta, or Pickering, Ontario. And this driver is kind of a smart aleck driver, but he was lots of fun. Him and we'd been friends, but we hadn't really ever driven together. And when we were kind of all grounded in the Winnipeg yard, and finally dispatch says, okay, they're going to let us across the border because this is the morning the towers fell, right? So we get to the border,
Oh no.
and we get to the border, and Jim, the driver, is like, he's driving. So customs asked us if we have anything to declare, and no, we didn't. Like, we were very experienced border crossers, and until the customs agent asks him what's in the trailer, and he answered sailboat fuel. And the customs agent right away says, well, where's the paperwork? And he's like, no, 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 we don't have any paperwork for it. We just have a load of sailboat fuel. The customs agents see no humor in that and decided to totally strip the truck down. Because of course, sailboat fuel means that the trailer's full of air. It's empty.
Right.
We thought it was funny. Me, not so much. But
Yeah, yeah. The problem was that day,
yeah,
that was a of all the days. I mean, the social irony in that joke is of all the days to tell a joke, that wasn't the day
all
to
the
tell a
days to
joke.
tell that joke. But he was just
That
trying to lighten the mood at the border.
that unfortunately that was just one of the worst days in modern history. The
Yeah,
problem with that for him would be that nothing could have lightened the mood, or nothing could have helped that day. That's the problem with
no,
that.
you couldn't have lightened the mood with a sky crane that day.
No.
It wasn't being lightened at all. But
So what happens? So
oh, they searched. They scanned our IDs and our documents, and away we went. There was nothing they could hold us for, but we spent a couple hours at the border we weren't expecting,
mm, mm.
because I think everything we had on the truck ended up on the ground for them to look through.
That's that's kind of interesting. That's a very interesting story. That's actually not funny at all, really. But that's a very interesting 9/11 story, though. That's kind of an interesting experience, you know. Yeah, yeah. And then now, I'm sure when you were driving the city bus, I'm sure you had a lot of characters that got on your bus. Who were some interesting passengers or some bizarre things that happened on that bus? By the way,
Driving the city bus,
this podcast is for adults only, so you can go as graphic as you want. So I'm sure some graphic things happen. Go ahead.
driving the city bus. Well, there's one gentleman that most of the drivers know, and he comes on the bus and he physically has got garbage bags full of stuff, and he goes to the back seat of the bus and he sorts through it. And I've ridden the back of the bus going back to the garage or whatever, and he sits there and he'll spend the whole trip reading the chip bags that are in his garbage, and sorting out his coffee cups. And he was an interesting fella. Or we had another lady, and I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to shame these people, because some of them,
Well, the first guy you mentioned sounds like he was homeless or he had some sort of
he,
disability.
he was homeless, and I think he had a learning disability,
Yeah,
or some cognitive issues.
that's interesting though. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there was another older lady, and she still rides the bus today, and she wears white gloves, and she's an older white-haired lady, and she comes on the bus and she's almost the transit police. She tells people to get their feet off the seat, to close the windows, but she starts fights on the bus because she's not racially appropriate. She's not politically correct whatsoever, and she'll start a kerfuffle on the bus and get off the back door and just scurry down the street. Um, one interesting story, and it's kind of on my YouTube channel, but I'll tell it again because it's
You
kind of
didn't
one
tell
that.
me. Well, see, that's why I'm glad you're here. You didn't say you're on YouTube.
Oh well, yeah, I have a small YouTube channel that I'm
Oh,
kind of
you're
trying to
very
get.
shy about. You're very humble about it. We'll make sure to promote it here. Yes, go ahead. Tell what happened on
Uh,
your YouTube channel story. Yeah.
well, I'm driving the bus one day, and and it was close to the beginning of a shift. So I had just gotten on the bus 2 or 3 stops ago because the bus drivers switch mid route, right? Where one driver gets off and one driver gets on. And I'm driving along, and this guy comes up, and he's madder than a Mad Hatter. And he comes up, I told you I wanted off at such and such a stop. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. When did you get on the bus? Oh, I got on the bus way up at North Main. I said, well, I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't driving the bus then. The previous driver, if you didn't notice, was like a 5'6" blonde lady, and I'm a 6 foot tall fat white guy. Oh, yeah, I hadn't noticed, he said. And he gets off the bus, but it's the whole the inattention people pay into their lives, right? All he knew is he got on the bus and he talked to a driver, but he didn't somebody in a blue shirt, right? So yeah.
That's. I mean, you got it with like the basically the mild shaming there of the describing people and getting mixed up with people, but then you not being afraid to say that you're a pretty heavy a big white guy, and then you having the courage to say that that kind of adds to the humor of it. I see, I
Hey,
see.
I am who I am, man. I'm a big white guy, and there's nothing I can do about that.
Well,
I stand
good.
6 feet tall, and yeah. So going blind, going blind made me feel small pretty quick, though. So
Well, that's interesting because believe it or not, oh, this is interesting. I've never asked this question before. How tall do you think I am?
you know what? I'm not sure. I've had lots of interaction with you over some of the social platforms, but I'm
Oh,
not
those
sure.
those have been getting juicy. Those have been getting those those have been getting MA for mature audiences only. Let me tell you, those are not those are there's there's some characters. There's some personality in those things. Woo!
Oh, aren't they? Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
But how tall do you think I am?
I thought I would put you at 5'10", 6 feet, like average.
Right. Okay. Let's go with. Ooh. Let's do. I'll go for 6 feet. That's cool. That's cool. I'll go for 6 feet. Cool. Cool. I'm only 5'7", actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. No. Yeah. No. So yeah. Here's a funny story, and it's not transport related, but it's kind of where I was humbled for the first time in a long time because I've
Right.
always been big, bald, intimidating. I used to have my ears pierced. Like I, I'm always been a really nice guy, but I used my size
Oh
as a
sure.
level
No, no. I
as a
see what
level
you
of
look like. I mean,
protection.
I have usable vision. You don't let anyone take this away from you. You definitely have the trucker build. I mean, you look like a trucker, in
Okay.
inside and out. Don't you worry.
Okay. But anyway, so I'm sitting at the major hospital here where I live, and I'd been there for all day for multiple tests because it was right within the first couple of months of me going blind. So they had to do CAT scans and MRIs and a couple spinal taps and going through the routines, like going through just to kind of figure out what's going on. And then at the end of the day, the nurse puts me back in the emergency room or emergency waiting area while I'm waiting for my ride to come. And my ride's about a half hour out. So the nurse asked me if I wanted anything to eat because I wasn't allowed to eat all day. So I said, yeah, I'm pretty hungry. So something to eat would be great. So she brings me this little box lunch and it was wonderful. It had a sandwich and an apple or something and a pudding and a drink and stuff, like a nice little lunch. But it's the November in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So we have a homeless problem in Winnipeg, like most major cities do, and the homeless people collect in places that they can sit in to warm up. Well, all of a sudden, here's this guy getting a free box lunch. Well, we want one, we want one, and the nurse was very cordial. She says, "Okay, just give me a couple minutes, and I'll see what I can find for you guys." Like, and as she scurries off, and I did never felt so targeted in all my life, and I feel bad for saying it even. Like I felt like they were trying to steal my sandwich. And I didn't know what to do or where they were coming from because I went blind from between mid-July to the middle of August. I was blind. In middle of July, I took a trip driving a truck, and by mid-August, work was sending me home to go see what I could do about my eyes. Like it was not as fast as some stories I've heard, but really fast for me anyway, because I'd never planned or had any pre notion that I was ever going to be blind. So yeah, and then she came back with a pile of box lunches, and everybody was good. So it was 5 or 6 minutes of one of the most uncomfortable moments in my life. So
Right, right.
really humbling for a guy that was
Sure.
never really afraid of much. So
Really humbling for a guy who would have never been afraid that someone would take his sandwich.
that's
Right.
right. Well,
That's
since elementary school, anyway.
right, right. Well, you know what? If someone did take your sandwich in elementary school, I'll cut you a break because you know what happens when you're a kid. Like we wipe the record clean when you turn 18, so like that doesn't count, you know.
That's
But
right. That's right.
but right, but so let's dig into the blindness matter though. So I was born blind with glaucoma and a congenital heart defect and other issues along the way, but so, how did you discover this blindness issue, and what is the cause of your blindness in this case?
Well, my blindness is something called um, idiopathic intracranial hypertension is what caused it. And basically, it's too much spinal fluid collected in my head, putting pressure on my optic nerve, as I understand it, causing my optic nerves to die. And then the inattention by me to go seek medical attention as soon as I started to see a little bit of blurred vision. Because I always wear glasses and, okay, I'll take a day off work to go get my eyes checked. I'll do that next week. I'll do that next week. And eventually it
Mm-hmm.
was next week was too late. And like I said, two spinal taps, a CAT scan, an MRI scan to make sure because that all is also called a pseudotumor nubra. So it presents as a tumor, but when they look into it deeper, it's not really a tumor. Thank goodness. And quite often it presents with headaches and stuff, but I don't get those either. Like I feel pretty blessed. I'm only blind. I don't have any discomfort or pain or anything. So
That's good. That's great. Is this a congenital thing, or is this like a family thing? Does this run in a family line? Where does this particular situation arise from? Do you suppose?
the doctor, the optoneurologist that diagnosed it says it's basically weight related. And when you look it up, that's what a lot of them say. But a neurologist says no, he's seen people that are really skinny get it too because it when
Yeah,
you're really skinny, it narrows the channels for the fluid to flow, and when you're really large, it narrows the channels for the fluid to flow.
that's true.
So it's and and ironically, it happens more in women than men.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
so
So, in other words, you lost your vision basically a year ago,
3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Uh,
Now, what can you tell me? You know, we've talked a lot. Well, I've spoken with many other Canadians about this, but what has your experience been navigating the system in Canada as far as accessing, healthcare services, navigating this new blind world that you're thrust into now? What do you think about it?
well, I know healthcare services well in Canada is pretty good because within the blindness kind of came by the end of August. I took 2 weeks off and got in to see the specialists and everything. Like right now, I had surgery, my first eye surgery to relieve the pressure in my eyes. The first one was in September, and he was going to do both, but he decided to do one to see if it was successful. And just before Christmas, he did the second one, so that was pretty quick.
Right.
Um, the company I was working for had a really good disability program, so I got disability right away, short term and then long term. And now I'm on federal disability, so that's good. But and then the Canadian National Institute for the Blind was good until COVID hit, which
Mm-hmm.
just added another level of challenge. So yeah, because I went blind in August, COVID came in March, right? So about the time I was ready to accept that, yeah, maybe I should learn the white cane, shut down, right? So I did my cane training via Zoom.
Mm.
So I wasn't allowed to cross any busy streets. Um, until the summer, and then COVID our restrictions let up, and then we did some cane training, and me and the cane are best friends, and I'm glad I did that sooner rather than later. Um, and then some of the other programs I've been slow to get in. I live in a rural area. I don't live in the city of Winnipeg, so access to the in the rural area is a little bit sluggish. But if I can get into the city, it's there and it's offered. And I've been kind of slow on the uptake, but I'm getting more involved on the advocacy side because I'd like to see it
Good.
get better.
Well, that's great. That's great. And I'm
Yeah.
really glad you use a cane, by the way. You'd be surprised. A lot of blind people refuse to use a cane. That's a very common thing to refuse.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. It took me 6 or 8 months to decide. My daughter had to bring it out to me and said, "Dad, you need this."
right.
So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have issues with the cane for some reason. I mean, I'm 31, so when I was much younger, I was more like self-conscious about it. But now I realize, I really need the cane more actually for other people than for me. You know,
mhm.
the more I view it as the polite way of telling sighted people that I cannot see you. You know, so there's a lot of reasons. But then again, a lot of other blind people won't use a cane. So I don't. I kind of have limited sympathy in that regard. If you're blind and you won't use a cane, I don't know what more to tell you. Um,
Well,
to some
yeah,
extent.
I agree with you. It's the one way of telling other people that you're blind, and it's kind of my security blanket because my little limited vision, I can see contrast in sidewalks versus boulevards, but I can't see where the curbs are
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So it got me off the end of my driveway, and yeah, my cane and we're best friends. We go everywhere.
Well, that's nice. And now, what can you tell me specifically about the city of Winnipeg, as in accessibility, getting around Winnipeg? Like what? Like I've never been to Canada, so what can you tell me?
Well, like I said, I don't travel in Winnipeg that often, but
Mm-hmm.
they do have a paratransit or a transit plus system, which is good. And then with the if you're a client of the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, you ride mainstream transit for free, which makes it better. And they have the audible crosswalks and stuff, and the transit buses all call out the bus stops. And like I said, I don't travel in Winnipeg all that much. I live about 45 minutes outside of Winnipeg in a small town, and we've got the audible crosswalks and the little plastic things that my cane taps funny on, so I know I'm at an intersection.
Right, right.
And the people are all very helpful in the stores and stuff because, like I said, I don't let it hold me back. If I want to go to the store to get a drink or a frozen pizza or something, I go trucking down the road and go get it. I
Well,
don't
good.
wait for somebody to do it for me. So
And that's really excellent. I think a lot of blind people will appreciate this conversation and they'll appreciate your motivation in life. Probably I would say that actually your line of work before you lost your vision as a professional driver, trucker, bus driver, all that driving, I think that's given you a lot of motivation to keep moving in life, right? It's a type of work where you have to keep on trucking on, basically, keep on moving. And I think that's helped you probably psychologically today to be able to keep moving in life and keep moving forward. So,
well, yeah, and you've always got to make it work. And I could sit
there
down
you
here,
go.
sit in my apartment and wallow or
Hmm.
move on with life, and that's where I'm at. kids that I don't want my kids to see me wallow. So like
Yeah,
it's a matter of you've got to overcome whatever is presented, plain and simple, right?
absolutely. Now, how old are your children?
I have a guy that's about to turn 13 next week,
Hmm.
and I have a 22-year-old son, a 25-year-old daughter, and a 27-year-old daughter.
Hmm. Hmm. I see.
So,
And the people in their the adults in their 20s, are they studying or working? What do they do?
one of them's in the 22-year-old son is in the military. Um, the 25-year-old daughter's in finance, and the 27-year-old has decided to be a stay-at-home mom. So she's on maternity leave right now, but she's just deciding to raising her son is more important than working. So
Good, 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 good.
no,
That's
absolutely.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, yeah. And what are some, I guess, what are some other, things that you want to basically get off your chest, or some other things that are going on, in Canada, around the universe, that you really want to maybe talk about, or even what are some things that you want to hear my opinions on?
Well, one of the things it's kind of a loaded question, or yeah, because one of the things I really noticed in the last couple of years, and it's really becoming a passion of mine, is the blind people have to we've got to quit being invisible, and the the contrast in terms is intended there. We've got to quit being the flowers in the attic and be seen and heard, and without being intrusive, and with positive experiences, because we're you go to a grocery store, you go to a Walmart, or you go anywhere, and nobody sees us because we always get our family to go run and do our errands, because a lot of places aren't as accessible as they think they are. And if we only think in a city of 500,000 people, there's only 100 or so blind people, no one's going to support us. Meanwhile, I know in the Winnipeg area, there's over 5,000 of us. So it's a matter of the blind community around the world has to advocate better and be more seen and more and not seen as being needing help, being seen as we're here and we're capable and we're doing things, we're functioning, but we're here. We don't need to hide in the shadows anymore. And I'm really becoming really passionate about that.
It's really
That
excellent.
that
So
yeah.
how are there 5,000 blind people in Winnipeg? How did you figure that out?
I kind of on the volunteer advocacy committee with the CNIB, and that's the number of registered clients that the CNIB in Winnipeg has is 5,180 something.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, what for those who don't know, who are listening, what is the CNIB and how does it work? And specifically, what volunteering are you doing for them?
The CNIB is the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. They're a 125-year-old charity that was brought that came into play shortly after World War One for the blind veterans that were coming back from the war to raise money to help with with AIDS and to help them live live as blindness. And currently, the the mission statement is changing what it means to be blind. So they do some advocacy. They offer programs, both social and educational. I've been volunteering on the advocacy committee to kind of run some public awareness campaigns, or working on public awareness campaigns. And also, I volunteer to help run a Friday afternoon social group
And
or to facilitate.
that's part of the what? And what's that? That's part of the what?
Part the afternoon social group. That's
Right.
it's yeah, it's just that it's one of the social programs or virtual programs they run so that blind people can sit around and chat. I'm good at
And
getting people to sit around and chat.
I've noticed it. You're very And you're very, you know what? You're very easy to talk to, and you're very passionate about that importance, and you understand the importance of sitting around and talking. You really understand that, definitely. So, what are some issues that these blind people in this social group want to talk about when they do sit around and chat? What are some consistent things that you're hearing that keep coming up?
Well, quite often I'm finding, and even in other social platforms that I'm sitting with blind people, they just want to talk about stuff. They don't always want to talk about being blind, first of all. And then when they do talk about it, it's about how to be blind and how to do stuff about blindness. And then you hear about public education. People have forgotten what the white cane is about because we don't talk about that anymore. And people have forgotten what the guide dog is. It's not just a pet. It's a very important tool. As much as people who have guide dogs love their guide dogs to pieces, but they're still an important tool and they're working. And I know in North America where guide dogs aren't supposed to be denied entry anywhere, and we're still having facing barriers for that.
We face it here too in the states.
Well,
We
yeah,
face. Oh yeah.
it's Canada and the United States, and then and I was talking with a lady today. If you travel internationally, they quarantine the guide dogs for 2 weeks. Like, so what's the point? Like these guide dogs are very important to the lifestyle of the people who have the dogs. Um, and it's simple things like that. And then the other part is some of the assistive technologies we have are so cost prohibitive that it's really hard for blind people to use the technologies that were designed for them. And they were given tax-free government grants to design these things, and then they charge the blind people an arm and a leg to have them. So why are they getting tax-free grants if they're going to charge us $5,000 for an OrCam, for example?
Yeah, yeah,
And 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 then the people who go blind in their 50s, they they help us to a certain extent, but it's not the same for me to learn Braille as for someone who was learning Braille at 6 years old, because the adult brain isn't as absorbing of information as a child's brain. It's not in a learning mode anymore.
right, right.
So,
Yeah, I started learning Braille when I was like 2 or 3 probably. So
oh, right on. Okay. Yeah. And for me, I haven't tried it. I'm almost out of reach. But, and yet in Canada, our money has Braille on it to let us know the denomination. So,
yeah, that's a big thing there. In the states, I mean, you remember from all your driving, the
mhm.
American money is just the green color. Over the years they've added some coloration, but a lot of other for some people that are, especially Americans that listen, that are a little confused about why this is so important, is because in other countries the notes, when we were using physical money, the notes were different colors. You know, so if you're a blind person but you have some usable vision, you can you could just look at the color and know what it is. But yeah, what about there in Canada? Do when you use notes, does each of the notes have a different color?
Oh, all our notes are different colored. And then like a $5 note has one little um, collection of bumps.
Mm-hmm.
A $10 note has two collections of bumps. A $20 note has three, a 50 has four, and a 100 has five across
Mm.
across the top, like Braille style bumps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because
That's good.
we're using a money that's got a lot of plastic in it, so the bumps are able to sustain being in a pocket.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. This used to be a big issue debated and talked about in the states, but as electronic money and electronic payments became more and more and more common, the paper became less and less common, and then people stopped talking about it. But it was quite the thing. Hmm.
Yeah, I haven't had paper money in my pocket for a couple of years now.
I guess we just don't need it anymore. I guess. So another thing
Well,
that you
I wouldn't go as far to say that. I don't want to
oh
see
I
paper
would go
money
that
go
far.
away, but
So another interesting thing is that so it turns out that you're a YouTuber as well. So when did you get into YouTube? Tell me all about your channel.
Well, my channel is it's about doing things blind. It's called Doing It Blind with Jason, and it's just doing everyday things with sight loss. Everything from there's a video about how I make my bed to using a chainsaw, and some of it's a little bit out there because it's not an instructional video. It's just kind of goofing off, and some of it's a little more instructional. And then there's a few trucker stories in there, a few bus driver stories, just kind of the everyday life of a blind guy, right? Of this blind guy, not every blind guy, just me. It was kind of to pass the time and to kind of express what I was going through, and just to kind of I did it in the last year or two to kind of come to terms with where I'm at, my own
Mm-hmm.
personal therapy, and I put some of it on YouTube, and then I still make them. I'm still making YouTube videos, just not like 5 a day like I did in the very beginning, because it's still growing and it's moving pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's wonderful. I think you should definitely continue to do that. I think YouTube is a tremendously positive aspect of my life and a tremendously positive hobby. So just keep doing it. And you never know who you're helping. That's the other beauty of YouTube. You never know who secretly watches and is forever changed or helped, even in the smallest way. You never know. So that's wonderful. Have you built a community around that channel? I mean, are you starting to get some traction? Are you feeling that people are, really tuning in?
That traction, that one's building slowly, and that was kind of my frustration with YouTube at first, is it builds rather slowly. But
Super
at the
slowly.
same time, it is building. I'm finding way more traction with my Facebook project, so that's where I spend my time nowadays. So
Yeah, well, Facebook has a lot of tools that you can do a
yeah,
lot of different things with Facebook. So, right, right.
yeah.
That's good. That's all extremely good. Um, do you get any sense that you're reaching with your YouTube? Are you reaching blind people in other countries or?
I've seen some of the comments, and there's some from other countries. Yeah, I think the YouTube is kind of it's getting a broad reach. There's some videos that have miraculously got like a couple thousand views, which I don't know how, but it worked.
Wow.
But part of it is when you give it a funny title, or blind guy chainsawing seems to be a great title for a video. Everybody wants to
Ah.
see that. I think they're looking for fingers being gone, but all my fingers. So
Mm-hmm.
I like to have fun with life, though.
I see. I see. Oh, I just thought of a good title for this episode. So that's good to know. Yeah. Now outside of North America, what other parts of the world have you been to?
I spent 6 months in Cyprus with the Canadian military a long time ago
Right.
on a
Yeah.
United
And
Nations
that's and
tour.
that's a really and that's a really fascinating thing too. Are you able, or do you want to share with me some general experiences you had in the Canadian military? It just in a general sense.
Well, just I was I joined young. I was in the Canadian artillery, and I was lucky enough to get a United Nations tour to Cyprus, so I got to see part of the world. Um, and then the world kind of started falling apart, and I was kind of disillusioned. So I got back. I decided I was going to live a civilian life instead. And that's about it there.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Now, what can you tell? What are some interesting things that you experienced, on Cyprus? What are some interesting things that you went through?
Well, Cyprus was kind of a cool place because we were there close to the end of the Canadian involvement. So it was more of it was a neat learning experience. We went skiing in the morning one morning and went swimming in the afternoon, because Cyprus has like the nice mountains and then great beaches. Um, got to see how kind of in a way how the world works, where the conflicts over really mundane things get blown out of proportion and cause global conflicts over things that in the school playground would have been resolved within 10 minutes. And that's only my humble opinion.
That's a really, that's a really, humbling thing to say. That's a really fascinating, it's a really fascinating philosophy and a fascinating comment to make. What are some global problems, or even maybe have you made any connection between some of the problems you saw, in the army,
Well,
and maybe some of the problems even in the blindness community? In other words, are you using any of your prior experience to solve problems in the blindness community?
I find like on the playground, when one kid has something and another kid wants it and they start fighting over it, we teach them to share. And as we grow older and the communities we are involved in get bigger, one country has something and the other country doesn't, they go to war over it. The rest of the world doesn't say, well, it's a natural resource, or it's a vital resource for both countries to function. You should share it. No, no, no. We send them weapons so they fight over it instead, and that's ridiculous.
Right. Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
in the blindness community, I feel sometimes, and I'm really new to the blindness community, so I don't want to
Sure.
speak out of school, but I find that there's the blindness community as a whole, but then there's the people that are 100% blind and the people with some vision. And there's the people that were born blind, and there's the people that went blind partway through life. And then the people that went blind half partway through life, where did they go blind? Like, did they go blind as a teenager? Did they go blind in their 20s, or did they go blind in their 50s or 60s or 70s? And those people are all measured in the blindness community. And I think we need to unite, that we're the blindness and visually impaired community, and as a united voice, we work together, and that we just live life on a spectrum, on a common goal of making life better for the blind community,
I think
instead
you're
of
on to.
being
I think you're on to something.
instead of being divisive. Like, I've heard things like, well, blindness and African American, well, they're treated different, and blindness and LGBT, they're treated different, and like, let's quit these divisive wedge issues, and the whole blindness community as a whole work
Mm-hmm.
together.
I support that, and I agree that it's a problem, and I support what you're saying there. I think that they should. The other thing I'll tell you, from the bottom of my heart is like, look, I was born blind, so you'll start to notice the more you get to know me on and off air that that when you're born blind, the only and I was thinking about this just today. I was watching some other content or seeing someone else in the community who I know. Oh, she became blind as a teenager, and and it's very noticeable to me. You have to understand that the people that were born blind, like me, we don't relate blindness to any sense of loss. And what I mean is that if you're born blind, you don't have a memory of, in my case, I don't have a memory of driving a truck or, which you clearly loved and enjoyed, right? I don't have that fun memory. Or I don't have a memory of being a bus driver and having a crazy lady start policing my bus, right? I don't have that memory. So when you're born blind, you don't view blindness as a loss. It's just who you are. And I think what you have overcome gracefully is that you did at some level see that blindness was a loss, right? You couldn't do the job you loved anymore, right? So
Well,
go ahead.
well, yeah, but I've also been told that I was lucky that at least I got to experience that by someone who was born blind, and I don't take offense to that, because they're honestly true. I'm very blessed that I got to see North America in all its
Right?
glory,
No,
and
no, no.
see
What I
things I
mean,
didn't even know existed.
sure, sure. So what I mean is, when you interact with the blindness community, you're going to notice. And I mean, I'm not, and I agree with you. It's not okay. but I'm forewarning you that the longer you're interacting with us blind people around the universe, you're going to see that there's a huge, and I don't even want to use the word wall, a huge chasm or barrier, not even barrier, like a huge philosophical divide between the people that were born blind and then the people that become blind later. I've noticed it tremendously. It's a lot harder to become blind later on as you're when you're an adult. So that's significantly more challenging than being born blind, and then it's just your life.
And I'm not even saying it's harder. It's just that it's a two different experiences, but with it's a
Right.
common goal. I think
Right. And I
of,
don't think
of,
it's and I don't
of kind of
necessarily agree that it has to be harder. I'm just saying that that's the way that it's perceived and
yeah,
the way that people would say,
because
well, yeah.
the people who have gone blind could learn a lot from the people that were born blind because you guys, the people that were born blind, have learned to function like this, and you guys know lots of tips and
No,
tricks
but
that
here let me this is really interesting.
uh,
I didn't learn how to function. I functioned.
you function right. So
That so no. So here's the way that works. Actually, this is really weird. No, you can't learn from me. I can't teach you anything because I don't know what it's like to be sighted. So you can't
fair
learn
enough.
from me. It's really bizarre. I know. It's completely messing up your mind. I know. I get it. I get it. I know. You're like, what? What the hell? What? No, he won't teach me. No, I gladly will. But when it comes to blindness issues, I promise you that you aren't gonna learn a damn thing from me, for the reason that I didn't have to learn to be blind. I
Right.
was,
I
am,
have
and
to
will
adapt.
be. So you unfortunately, so the difference is that you have to learn how to be blind from other people who are in your same, who are in the same boat as you. That's the
Okay, that
difference.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird though. It's a really weird thing, you know. And then there's the debates that you'll have to just go along with and just put up with hearing, year in and year out. And we hear them in the rooms on Facebook all the time in different ways. There's all sorts of debates.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but that will never go away. But a lot of those debates come from people that are, you know, um, maybe dealing with frustration or dealing with other issues in their lives. People who have harder lives than us, are dealing with these, very, very, some people have very challenging lives. Soon, later tonight, you'll be added to the private group, the WhatsApp group for Aaron's Opinion, and you'll get to talk to blind people who I've interviewed from all over the world. I mean, even Iran, Middle East, Africa, Asia. So, I mean, those people have a significantly more challenging life than either one of us, but still, they overcome. But yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Besides Cyprus, though, did you get to go to like other parts of the Mediterranean, other nice parts of the Mediterranean?
I did a day cruise and got to see Egypt and for a day and Israel the next day, but that's about it.
Oh yeah, you told. Oh yeah, you told me about that. Yeah, in the
Yeah,
group one day we had that guy from Egypt. Yeah, that was cool. That was a good mix. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that group is awesome. That's my pride and joy right now.
they are some kid. There's some characters. They have a personality. That whole group is one big
That
personality. I mean, you could. I mean, if there was a way for you to record those rooms, I mean, you could turn that into a whole YouTube empire with all the crazy stuff we say. Oh my God. I
oh,
mean,
so yeah, that's my Facebook page, the blind coffee group,
oh yeah.
and yeah, they are crazy, and it's just fun and laughs, and yeah, like I said, that's my pride and joy right now. It's growing faster than I could ever imagine. At 6 weeks, we're at 450 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
That's incredible to have 450 people in 6 weeks. I mean, that's
and they're from all
wonderful.
over the world.
That's
Like you
wonderful.
mentioned, the gentleman from Giza, Egypt, and
Right,
we have a gentleman that
Giza. Right, Giza.
from Giza, yeah, and another gentleman calls in from Nigeria,
Yeah.
We got a group of people that call in from Australia, England, Ireland, the Czech Republic, all over the United States and Canada. It's phenomenal, and the stories and the conversations are so much about so much not about being blind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I forget lots of times that these people are blind, and it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, we also have to be careful that sighted people aren't secretly joining the group. So how do you know? You know, maybe some of these people are faking.
Well, we try and keep that we try and
I'm
keep that
kidding. I'm
shut.
kidding. I know,
And I feel sorry for anybody that wants to fake being blind.
but no, but there, believe it or not, it's really disturbing. But there are people that have and do. It's
Oh,
really weird.
I don't put it past human beings to do weird stuff. So
Yeah, that's really sad. The faking a disability. Yeah, yeah, but
yeah,
that's pretty low. But I've heard worse actually. But yeah.
yeah. There's comedy movies about it, which is appalling in itself. But
Well, what do you? Well, what's your opinion about? See, that's another interesting thing. When is it okay to tell a blind joke?
anytime,
No,
life's too short not to laugh. I'm sorry, and a
that's
joke is a
interesting.
joke.
That was a very you gave me a very candid, a very Canadian response there. You were very quick to just go
Oh,
with it. And,
a
you know,
joke is a joke, and these poor comedians that are
yeah.
being canceled because they're telling a joke because somebody doesn't think it's funny. Grow up. And the
Well,
rule that's
okay.
what
To some okay,
that's one
to
of the
some
big rules.
extent, right? To some extent, I agree with you. To some extent, I agree. However, the sad reality of comedy is there's a saying in comedy, it's only funny because it's at someone else's expense.
Oh,
So, you're right.
I won't disagree with you. And but at the same time, like that's one of the big rules in my Facebook group is if you
Hmm.
see a post that offends you, keep scrolling. It's only Facebook. And
Yeah.
if you're gonna post an opinion or speak an opinion, be prepared that someone might have an opinion that's opposing to yours.
Right.
And an opinion is never wrong. It's your opinion. It's taken your how you've heard the facts, how you've weighed to your knowledge and your wisdom and your life experience.
Hmm.
It's the conclusion you come to, and somebody else could come to a completely opposite conclusion based on
Absolutely.
their education and their life experiences. Neither one of you are wrong. You just have a different conclusion, and wisdom comes from being able to talk to each other without throwing shoes at each other.
That's cool. Wait, so that was a very you put that in a in a very interesting way. Wisdom comes from being able to not throw shoes at people. That's
Or rocks at each other or whatever, to be able to sit there and talk to somebody that's got an opposing view without
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I disagree with you. I don't hate you.
Right, right. And this is a concept that in the States nowadays we're having a really hard time, being able to have even a conversation. I mean, look, I agree with 90% of what you're saying. I also think, I think with the professional comedians though that have millions of followers, you know, there secretly is a line, there secretly is a, ooh, that's a bit much. You can get out of control. So it goes both ways. You're right. People need to have maturity, but then also, well, so do a lot of people.
Well, but if
Yeah.
people aren't finding a certain comedian funny and they quit going to his show, he's going
Yeah.
to adjust. But as soon
Right.
as people get all mad and start protesting him, he's going to do it more
That's true.
because he's getting attention. But as soon as you walk away from him because he's not funny, or her because they're not funny, they have to readjust their comedy because it's not hitting.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, as we start to roll out, the come to the end, towards the end here, about five. I'll talk for another 5 minutes here. But what are some questions that you really want to know about Aaron Richmond? I always like to say, if you can ask me only one question to make me sweat to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you really want to know about me? And let me tell you, I can take anything.
Well, Aaron, I spent the last couple of days just kind of getting to see your style of interviewing, and I've seen you in the blind coffee group rooms, and you come in and interview all the time. I appreciate that. It's awesome. But who, if you could interview anybody, who would you want to interview?
I would see. I don't want to see. I would want to interview major podcasters around the world who have a major influence. Um, but you know what? Since I love what they do, and since they're amazing people, I mean, I generally don't name drop, but in this case I will because I love what they're doing. Jordan Harbinger, I absolutely adore his show. You would love it if you aren't listening to his show. You're gonna love it. I would love to. I would love to interview him, or some of his other people that work with him. Or I would also love to be in the hot seat, being interviewed by some of these people. Boy, I would love to be interviewed by Jordan Harbinger. It won't happen, but who knows? You never know. Wouldn't mind a conversation with Joe Rogan. I'm sure you've heard of him, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, wouldn't mind sitting down with him. That would be pretty cool. I'd have to have a nice cup of coffee, a nice beer, something like that. That would be a talk. And then there's so many others, but then the other one that's a really fascinating person who I also just love their content. They're doing a wonderful job in the community. I would love to interview Lex Fridman, or I say it the other way. I would love it if Lex Fridman interviewed Aaron Richmond. Um, but what about you though? Who do you want to talk to, or who would be a major influence that you would want to interview?
I'm not so much an interviewer, but I would love to be involved with the Steven Crowder podcast.
Now, who's that person?
He's a right wing political commentator, and he's all about. But he was raised in Montreal, so he's got a slant on Canada that is a little bit different. He's not a fan of Canada, but I would love to kind of change his mind on that a little bit because he's a little bit skewed. He left when he was 18, and he's because he's a dual citizen and he's been in the United States ever since.
Right.
But I like his way of thinking, and he's all about not canceling, but attacking woke society. And I think the whole level of political correctness is going to ruin Western culture. It's hurting us, and that's my political view, which I try not to air all that much.
Well, you just aired it, and that's fine, and you aired
You
it
know,
beautifully. Well, Jason, it's been a tremendous conversation as always. I knew you would hit it out of the park, as all these great guests do. But so, if someone wants to get in touch with Jason Reynolds, how can they do that?
well, I'm on Facebook just as Jason Reynolds, and then there's the Blind Coffee Group is my Facebook group where I'm heavily involved. I have my YouTube channel, which is Doing It Blind with Jason, and that's basically my social media presence. I've tried Twitter and I'm trying TikTok, but we're not talking about that right now because that's not all that blind friendly. I'm kind of doing it as a team player for a project. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
but YouTube and Facebook definitely.
I agree. Wonderful conversation. I'm sure people will have a lot of comments and great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jason, for joining us here on Aaron's Opinion. It's been a pleasure talking to you. You are forever welcome here on Aaron's Opinion, and we'll see you guys same place, same time, same place next week. So until then, stay safe out there. Jason, God bless you, man. Keep up your great work up there in Canada. And as we like to say on Aaron's Opinion, since you spend so much time listening to Aaron's Opinion, how do I end the episode?
I'm not sure.
That's okay. Thanks so much, everybody. That was great material. Thanks so much, everybody. Help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.